Michael Jordan took a liking to Chris Johnson, Marques Johnson's son. Mike instructed Tim Grover and myself and Nigel that he wanted Chris to be on his team no matter what.
That's a huge compliment for Chris, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'll never forget the first day Cedric came up to the Dome. He seen that Chris was on Mike's team, and he had to wait. And he says, like, why is he playing? And he said, because I heard it's supposed to be all pros, right? I was about to explain it to him. Mike said to me, Nate, what did he say? I said, well, Cedric wanted to know why was Chris playing and he's not a pro and all that. And then Mike said, because I want him to play. And so Cedric had some choice words. So Mike said, when you get on this court, I'm going to dunk on you. So he got on the court. They jabbing and trash talking each other. And Mike said, what did I tell you? He made a move on Cedric where he faked Cedric. Cedric went one way, Mike went the other way, and they met at the rim, and sure enough, he dunked on him. But on the very next play down the court, Cedric Sabala's team, somebody shot the ball and missed, and Nigel can attest. Cedric, he's the garbage man. He cleaned it up and laid it up. He didn't back down, but Mike did dunk on him.
I also remember somebody said, look whose name is on the dome. And that's who determined who played. It wasn't Mike that said that. It was somebody else.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So I'll get goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass. Yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 75. Thanks for joining me. Space Jam recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. I was just 21 years of age back in 1996, which makes me feel old. With all this nostalgia, I was compelled to do a deep dive on the iconic feature. So I put out the call to two of the movie's most important contributors, Nate Bellamy Jr. and former guest and great friend of the show, Nigel Miguel, episode 68. We cover everything from Space Jam's origin story, the seeds of which were sown some 4+ years prior to its cinematic release, what life was like on the set, the inner workings of the green screen team, long days of filming, and of course, inside stories on the legendary Jordan Dome. Plus, we get the scoop on how Dennis Rodman would ultimately become a member of the Chicago Bulls, and plenty more. If you can't get enough of the Space Jam goodness, I recommend 2 more episodes of the show, where more insight into the movie and the Jordan Dome can be gleaned. Episode 30 features a conversation with Australian sports broadcaster and journalist, the great Bill Woods. I was joined on that episode by another great mate of mine, Todd Spear. We speak to Bill, who was granted access to the Jordan Dome at the time and interviewed Jordan. And episode 59 of the show features NBA All-Star Cedric Ceballos, and that's a name you'll hear a number of times in this episode today. Towards the end of the episode, I'll share another great podcast review, and you can add yours by visiting inallairness.com/review. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. Simply visit inallairness.com/news. Show notes for this episode, including links to numerous topics covered, are at inallairness.com/75. Now, on to the show. My guests today have been linked for more than 20 years. They both worked behind the scenes and also in front of the camera on Space Jam, the highest grossing basketball movie ever made, a combination of live action and animation, and the movie recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. Nigel Miguel and Nate Bellamy Jr., thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Adam, for having us.
Yes, Adam, thank you.
You're more than welcome. Now, Nigel, you're no alien to listeners of my show, and I'm sorry for that terrible joke already, but in your case, it's welcome back. You were my guest on episode 68, and we discussed your life in basketball, and we briefly touched on your involvement with Space Jam. But today, We've also brought in a good friend of yours, Nate, into the picture as well to discuss Space Jam in some more detail. To this day, it's still one of my all-time favourite movies, alongside Ferris Bueller's Day Off and the Back to the Future trilogy. But before we even get to Space Jam, how far back does your friendship go, guys?
It goes back to 1991, working with Joe Picker on a Orange Crush commercial being shot in Venice Beach with Magic Johnson.
Oh, wow.
That's the first time Nigel and I met. Nigel, am I correct with that?
That's actually pretty good, Nate. Yeah, it's 1991 Venice Beach with Magic.
It would either be in July or August of that year. And the commercial had something to do with Magic taking a quarter and either shooting it or flicking it at the machine from a distance, and it magically goes into the slot and he picks the soda that he wants. So
correct.
I love it. That's great. So you go back 25 years, which is fantastic. So obviously there's some great memories shared between you both. Nigel, you previously mentioned to me and our listener that for Space Jam, to get the green light from Michael Jordan, it had to be directed by Joe Pitka, who Nate just name dropped as well. The man responsible for directing the series of Hair Jordan ads that preceded the movie. We also discussed how you were MJ's body double for about 7 years. Did that include any of those Nike commercials that featured Bugs Bunny?
Not the Nike commercials for Bugs Bunny, but a series of other ones. I was on the set with Nate because Nate actually coordinated those spots that led into Space Jam. I don't think I did any of the Hair Jordan spots.
No, Nigel didn't do any of the Hair Jordan spots in terms of being in them, but he was instrumental in both because he was such a good friend of Michael's, because they go back to being McDonald's All-American.
Mm-hmm.
Just having Nigel on the set made Mike be more at ease and more willing to do what they needed him to do, because in working with Mike, some of the production people were really somewhat anxious about him wanting to stay around for maybe an extended period of time more than was requested, because, when you're doing these commercials, sometimes things go longer than you anticipate. So Nigel being around helped Michael's comfort level and made him so at ease that it made it easier for the shoot. In that regard, Nigel was an intangible asset to the shoots.
That's great. Now, Nate, given that you had a lot to do with the filming of those ads at the time, I think the first of them may have featured at one of the Super Bowl ad breaks back in 1992. And at that stage, was there even any talk of how it could become something in terms of a feature-length movie, or did that sort of come to be a few years down the road?
It's interesting you posed that question. So what happened is Nigel and I did that first commercial with Joe Picker with Magic. So shortly after that, Joe needed some understanding from Michael. And I was doing a lot of extra work, so the people that was handling that picked me because I was the same height as Mike and we wore the same size shoe. And that was for the Hair Jordan spot, which was going to be the first time Warner Brothers allowed their Bugs Bunny and the other cartoon characters be used in a commercial venture. And so it was a real big thing. And what I remember so vividly was our first day of shooting was on a Sunday, all right, at Cover Studios at the last soundstage. So when you're working in SAG and you work on a weekend, especially in a commercial, that's double time.
All right.
So the call time was like 8 o'clock in the morning. So we all get there, and they had built a replica of a basketball gym from New York City that had like a track above it. Because, a lot of those courts back, especially back in the day, had a track above the court. And so when we get to the set, you see all these Warner Brothers executives, and they were all dressed, in suits. And there was one lady was from Warner Brothers. She was dressed in a nice, outfit and what have you. Now it was 8 o'clock in the morning. So for the first 3 hours on double time with Joe Pickett, for the first 3 hours, we played basketball with music blaring. And you can see them sitting over there saying, what is going on? Right? Like, what's happening? I mean, we playing basketball now. While we playing basketball, Joe's crew was so used to being around Joe that they still were doing what they needed to do. All right. So it wasn't like things weren't getting done that needed to get done, But if anybody knows Joe, he has such a great passion for basketball. He even carries his own hoop with him no matter where he goes. So when he already has one, you're playing. And we played for 3 hours. I mean, and this is a true story. I mean, for 3 hours. It was incredible. So after that, Mike arrives. And so when Mike arrives, again, like I said, they was kind of anxious because, you know, this was going to be something different for him in terms of shooting commercial because he's going to be dealing with someone who's not there, right?
Yeah.
Bugs Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Bugs Bunny's not going to really be there. And because of that, it's going to take a little bit longer to get this done than a normal commercial. So, and I think he had made it known that he wanted to go play some golf and all this kind of stuff. So they didn't really realize how much time he'd be willing to spend on set. So he gets there. Nigel gets there as well. So when he sees Nigel, you know, that kind of, you know, he sees a familiar face. And of course he had worked with Joe before. That's the first time I get a chance to meet Mike. And matter of fact, the first time I met him, I was standing, setting up a shot. And there's a shot where they start with the shoes that he have on. I think it's the first shot of the shoes. And then the camera pulls all the way up and then you see him. And it's like, he says he's Michael Jordan. And he comes onto the set. And, you know, we shake hands. We say, what's up? Now, all of this is being filmed for behind the scenes because this was such a big deal that they were filming everything. So the first time I actually ever met Michael Jordan was captured on film.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So from that point on, I started to talk to Mike, you know, during some of the breaks with the shoot. What I say to Mike, first of all, I congratulate him. He had just became a world champion. This was 91. They had just beat the Lakers. I was talking to him about the controversy with him and Isiah. And when you look at the behind the scenes, you can actually see me talking to Mike while the music is playing. I'm sitting on an apple box and he's sitting like in a chair. And I mentioned to him that I really didn't like that here two successful black athletes like Mike and Isiah, that they were having this bickering between themselves like they hated each other. And I didn't understand that, and that didn't look good. So Mike wanted to tell me, like he said, Nate, let me tell you something. He said, it ain't me. He says, you seen what happened when I lost to them. I would shake their hands. But when they lost to us, how they walked off the court. So he said, it's not really coming from me. So I said, okay. So, you know, we just kept talking and he got more relaxed. And when he was on the set, he would be in the trailer. Well, Nigel would be on the set with us. But when he would go in the trailer, he would say, come on, Nigel. And Nigel would go into the trailer with him and they would play cards and people would come onto the set. And that really, really, really relaxed him to the point where he really wanted to stay on the set, which made all the people that were doing the shoot, you know, Warner Brothers executives, Joe Pickett, and the ad agency really happy because all of a sudden, you know, Mike was in this great mood. And I'll never forget, Joe Pickett came with me one time and said, Nate, how long have you been knowing Mike? I said, Joe, I just met him. And he was, but I think that went a long way in helping my relationship with Joe Pickett. But from that point on, we shot Hair Jordan in September 9th to September 12th. It was like a 3-day shoot. And then we did some extra shots for a calendar, Mike and I. It aired in 92 for the Super Bowl. And of course, it was a #1 commercial. Now, at that particular point, and Nigel might know more about this than I do, I don't think at that time they were really considering of doing a movie, even though that particular commercial went through the roof. Am I correct about that, Nigel?
Yeah, it came about after that. Then when you guys did the second set, it was in motion, but then at that point, I think the retirement or something. But the fact of them talking about doing the movie was after the second set you guys did.
Right. You're right, Nigel, because the second one dealt with Mike being on a basketball court with some kind of, you know, these monsters from outer space. And it was like a 90-second commercial.
Right.
Like Bugs Bunny taking a eraser and erasing them, you know.
That's when they brought in Marvin the Martian.
Right, exactly.
And that's when they were thinking along those lines of implementing that about the movie.
After that particular spot, Adam, that's when I think David Falk started having conversations with executives at Warner Brothers in regards to trying to potentially do some type of movie.
It's fascinating to hear how this sort of came to be. Now, when you referenced Isiah there for a moment, this time frame you're talking about, or at least mid to late 91, was about the same time that the Dream Team was finalised.
Right, and I was talking to Mike. I thought it was a shame that Isiah wasn't on the team.
True.
And then Mike was trying to say to me that he really had nothing to do with that, even though they were trying to put it in his lap, that the reason why he was on the team because Mike didn't want to play with him. And he was saying that's not true. I just want to give you a bit of trivia that has never been spoken before until today on your show.
Oh, I'd love to hear that, by all means.
Okay, prior to Space Jam being filmed, I went to Phoenix to watch Michael play as a baseball player when he was playing on the Barons. I actually went and watched him play in Phoenix, Arizona. And he got me some tickets, and I was sitting first base side, in the lower seats. And it was during that time when Mike mentioned to me that there was going to be some movie in the works with Ivan Reitman. That was the first time I heard of the movie that would eventually become Space Jam, is when I went to go see him play minor league baseball when he was playing with the Barons. And that was the first time he mentioned that to me, that there was some deal in the works with Ivan Reitman to do a movie with Warner Brothers.
That's some great insight there. I love that sort of stuff. Thank you very much for sharing it too.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the movie itself, I went to Internet Movie Database, a great website. For yourself, Nate, you were credited as basketball coordinator. Do you mind just explaining a little bit about what day-to-day tasks were involved in relation to that title, either before the movie even started filming and then when the movie actually was underway?
Well, it's interesting that they listed me as basketball coordinator because officially on the call sheet, that was solely Nigel's position and not my position.
Okay.
Now, how all this came about, Adam, was this. Once the movie started going and we had to talk about who's going to get paid what and how we was going to get paid, what was going to be our titles and all this kind of stuff, we had to come up with certain designations. All right. And so we worked out a couple of deals, and one of the deals was that Nigel was going to be basketball coordinator and I was going to be doing several different other things. Okay. Now, when it came to giving me a credit, they decided to also put me under that category. But Nigel and I both coordinated scenes. Nigel and I both helped with casting players and in terms of players who would be what we would call the green screen team. All right. Nigel and I both were very instrumental in making that happen. And also we were instrumental when we had the big basketball scenes with the NBA players. To the extent that Nigel and I were working closely with Warner Brothers payroll department, and Nigel can expound more on that.
Not to toot our own horn, but most of the NBA players outside of, the main 5 or 4, if you don't count Michael, we were responsible for. Those are our relationships with NBA Entertainment, along with NBA Players Association. We pretty much orchestrated it. Now, obviously, with the consent of Warner Brothers and, the producers and all that. But they gave Nate and I carte blanche to kind of, walk the walk and talk the talk. So we were able to cut some favorable deals with the players. And because going in, we already had a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. So it's a little different, us coming to them, making an offer as opposed to, somebody at Warner Brothers or some other casting director or whatever presenting that offer.
How did either of you feel about, well, particularly Nigel perhaps, with Jordan obviously having done countless commercials over the years, what were your thoughts on how he might adjust to being an actor in a movie-length feature, given that you go back to like the early 1980s, knowing Jordan? What did you sort of make of his entrance into the first full feature role?
Well, I know everything with him is about being authentic, and if he didn't feel that he would have been good in what he was doing, he wouldn't have wanted to do it. Unlike some of the other guys who I was about to get started on, most of those guys are characters, in their own right. They all have a piece of themselves that they're only willing to share amongst their boys or whatever.
Right.
And Michael's the same way, but, it's a little bit different when you're always the alpha. There's very few, you got your Magics or Bird or Charles or whatever that kind of look at him eye to eye at that time, especially. My thing was, like Nate was saying, it was just to make sure that he's comfortable, because when anybody's comfortable, that's when they do their best work. I wish that he would have done more, because he became so big that regardless of whatever he did, he would always be Michael Jordan. There were some things that Nate and I had put on the table during and after the production of Space Jam. But I think at that point, while he was willing to do one of them, which I think Warner Brothers was pitching, A Man Called Flint, that James Coburn series, which I felt that would have been just awesome for him, because he still could have been, that debonair type of guy, but he still could have been MJ, and he would have been just in another setting. Those are the type of roles that I think would have enhanced or would have brought the best out of Michael beyond Space Jam. Again, just having that comfort level with him is what makes him come out on screen the best, because he has an incredible presence just being there. The other part is just making him feel comfortable.
What I want to add to that is this. Working on the set with Mike, one of the things we have to keep in mind, this movie was a movie that was basically green screen. This wasn't a movie like where a lot of actors get an opportunity to do things they never did before, like go to exotic places around the world and travel or do something that they normally would never have done. So we didn't have that in regards to this movie. What we had was every day coming to the soundstage to this green screen that was all over the floors, all over the walls with these little red, orange dots every place. And, Nigel and I and the guys that we selected had to put on these ninja-type green suits, where the sneakers were covered. Everything was covered except for our eyes. That becomes very tedious. It becomes very tedious. It's like monotonous. Every day, same thing. So like the movie that Nigel was talking about, The Man from Flint, and like Flint, if he would have did a movie like that, he probably would have had a better. Now he really enjoyed the camaraderie with us being there with him because he knew us and he knew we was there to do our best to support his performance. And as the production went along, you saw Michael become more and more comfortable, which really added to his performance. But there was a couple of things Mike didn't like about Hollywood, all right, that kind of soured him. Especially, like I said, when you have to do a movie that's based on green screen and you really don't get a chance to see what it's going to look like until the finished product, is that the selling of the movie and people, once you say you're going to be in, all of a sudden now they have demands on your time. They want you to do this and they want you to do that. And he wasn't really comfortable with that aspect of it. Another aspect is this as well. Unlike most people who come into Hollywood who are just actors or even athletes turning to be actors, was some come in for the fame and the money. Mike had more fame than he knew what to do with it. And money-wise, Hollywood didn't have anything to offer him because it wasn't like he wanted to, really get into producing movies or things of that nature. So after we did Space Jam, he kind of got soured on that whole business because he really didn't need it.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of like after a day's worth of filming, I think they're referred to as dailies, where the director looks at what's been filmed and shot throughout the day. Was Jordan and even yourselves there, did you have much involvement in terms of seeing what was recorded each day on film and how much interaction Jordan may have had with where the storyline was going or how his performance was in general?
Yes, Nigel and I were very instrumental in looking at that, also along with Mike.
We got a chance to look at private dailies that were sent to him on several occasions. Being like his go-to guys, we got every perk that was available, that was offered to us that usually, if it wasn't because of him, we wouldn't have received.
Right. And also, keep in mind, Nigel and I had to work not only with Joe Picker, but we also had to work with the directors of animation. because most of the movie was
Yep.
going to be animation. So we had to coordinate with them as well with all the dailies in terms of what they wanted us to do, especially the green screen team, in terms of so things would look authentic and look real. Nigel and I were really busy. We wore a lot of hats. There was never a moment in time where we weren't doing something. And then after shooting for 12 hours, then we had the whole Jordan Dome for another 2 hours. That added to what we were doing. So it was a glorious experience. I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. None of us knew how Space Jam was going to turn out. I mean, I just recently talked to Mike back in August of this year. I said, Mike, did you ever think that Space Jam would be this big? And he said, I had no idea that it would.
It's become just a phenomenon. It's incredible that it's still 20 years later. And even as recently as a week or two ago, there were screenings again appearing in theatres across America to show the film again some 20 years down the line. So that says a whole lot about the importance still to this day that it's held by millions of people, it has to be said. Now, you mentioned there briefly, Nate, the Jordan Dome. That's a perfect lead-in, I guess, to what I was going to ask you and Nigel about. The two of you were both responsible for organising games that were played at the now legendary Jordan Dome, and it was the purpose-built structure that Warner Brothers put together that allowed Jordan himself to get back into that peak physical condition that led into the 1995-96 NBA season. At the time, did either of you know how important the Jordan Dome would be in terms of MJ's preparation for that 72-win season?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Well, like Nate was saying, it was work, but it was wonderful work. It's the type of work, especially at that time in our age, we would have done it for free. We would have never said that, but that's how.
Adam, excuse me, Nigel. I don't want to interrupt you. I apologize. Adam, you might have to edit out that free part, okay?
Okay. I say that to just let you know, one, Nate and I are basketball freaks. We're junkies. Two, we're passionate about filmmaking. So a project like that, we usually just get those in commercials in the 30, 60, 90-second jokes. But here it is. You have a feature film. You're working on basketball, animation. And then you actually go, after you finish shooting, because Mike was very precise. I'm giving you guys this because at this time, I am breaking to go do my real job. And after shooting, I don't care how hard or how tedious it was, that dude went there and put in the time, man. Put in the time. He gave Nate and I carte blanche on setting the games up, inviting the players there, making sure that the caliber of players that would be there would be at a certain level, push him, and then also it gave him a chance to interact with some of the younger guys that were there in LA that just wanted to be a part of what was going on. Some of the guys that we actually ended up hiring later were the same ones that we brought to the Jordan Dome to work out with Mike.
I just want to follow behind that and say this to your listeners. I want them to really pay attention to what I'm about to say. First of all, the Jordan Dome became a mystical, legendary place. One of the things that Nigel and I had the good fortune to experience by working with Mike on Space Jam and being part of what was going on at the Jordan Dome. So let me make sure you understand what the Jordan Dome was. It was a full court that they got from Long Beach Arena. It had an entertainment center with couches and tables and sound system and big screen TV. We had a full locker room with lockers and showers. We had a little putting green, and we had a gambling table, of course, so Mike could play cards, and had full sets of workout equipment that was designated by his trainer, Tim Grover. All the things that happened in the Jordan Dome in terms of training in basketball went to Tim Grover. What I got a chance to witness and what I had heard about Mike, even though I had known him for 3 to 4 years, was how hard he worked. And I got a chance for 3 months to witness this hard work because our day would go, we'd start at 8 o'clock, shoot for 4 or 5 hours, and have lunch. Mike would go to the Jordan Dome during lunch, do his training, would start with lifting heavy weights, go from lifting heavy weights to doing shooting drills. Okay? That's how he spent his lunch. He very rarely even ate lunch. He worked out. Then we go and we shoot for another 6 hours. And Mike said, okay, Nate, you and Nige go up to the Jordan Dome and get with Tim and start getting the games together. Nigel was very instrumental in the beginning to getting the UCLA NCAA championship team to come in the beginning before all the NBA players started to come. So he was very instrumental in that. And Mike would come and he would play for 2 hours every day after putting 12 hours on a set. And let me tell you something, working on a movie set, it's a different kind of work that fatigues you in a different kind of way. And I was just astonished on how much energy Mike had. And I also realized how dedicated that he was to the game. Not only did he come up there and play hard for 2 hours, but if his team would lose, he would sit at the basketball stand and then watch and then learn about some of the guys that were playing, like Reggie Miller. I'll never forget one time I was sitting there with Mike, Nigel, and myself, and Reggie tries to go left, and Mike says to me, he said, Reggie can't go left. That's what you mean, Mike? He just went left. No, he don't like going to his left. And from that moment on, every time Mike played against Reggie, he pushed him to his left hand. Because that's how Mike was. He was so dedicated. And then I looked at him, and I said to myself, if I was Michael Jordan, who already won 3 NBA championships in a row, you know, all the scoring titles and had all these commercials, I said to myself, I don't think I would work as hard as he was working. So I gained another level and measure of respect for him because he was really dedicated to the game of basketball, and he practiced to play it perfectly. And that's what I came away from that experience, working with him at the Jordan Dome. It was incredible to experience.
You put it eloquently, man, but also just the people that used to come by there.
Oh, my God.
Just to see, take a look or, you know, to see him, talk to him or whatever. And then was it Clint Eastwood that ended up buying all the weights and stuff that he had?
I'm not sure, but I'm glad you mentioned what you mentioned. We were the center of the universe, Adam. I mean, like what Nigel said, it was so many people come. I mean, I'm sitting there with Angela Bassett. I'm like, whoa, you know, Halle Berry, George Clooney, Kurt Russell, Steven Seagal.
Clint Eastwood came through, and you remember just all the execs from Warner Brothers, Tim Daly at the time, I think he was the head of the studio. He used to come by and speak to us and ask us if everything's okay, just give us a tour of the office. Honestly, Adam, we had access to Warner Brothers 100%, man. It was incredible.
Listen, Adam, Nigel and I was working closely with Warner Brothers payroll department. I mean, we were up in their payroll department. We seen all the checks that went out for everything that was under Warner Brothers, from cartoons to TV series it was incredible. And like Nigel said, we negotiated what players were not only going to get paid in terms of the amount they was going to get paid, but who would get residuals, who would not get residuals.
Wow.
So technically, Nigel and I should have had co-producer credits, to be honest.
Well, it sounds certainly like it. I don't even know where to go from here. I've been smiling from ear to ear for the last 3 minutes or so, just listening to you both talk about this. Nate, you mentioned there how Jordan was sitting out and watching the tendencies of some of these players. So even though he's playing inside his own dome, named after him, he still sits out if his team lost in the scrimmages.
Right, which was unlike Magic. Nigel and I know Magic extremely well. And if you know Magic, when he's playing, no matter if his team loses or wins, he's still staying on the court. Mike was not that kind of guy. Nigel, am I telling the truth, Nigel?
Again, it's another alpha male.
But what was beautiful, they had some kind of lockout going on, and because Magic was a part owner, you know, the owners and players couldn't really commingle with each other. And on the last day of the Dome, they had settled that, and Magic came to play at the Dome against Michael, and that was just beautiful.
That was a great day. That sewed things up because L.A. is Magic's town.
Without question.
He had to give way to MJ, taking lease of it for those 4 months or whatever.
But let me say what came out of Space Jam, Adam, for Michael, more than just the popularity of who he is, and that there's probably more people now, especially younger people, know Michael from Space Jam than know him as being Michael Jordan, the great basketball player, because a lot of them haven't seen him play. But he struck a real tight business relationship with Warner Brothers. Okay? Because look, they're about to release the 2 Jordan sneakers he wore in Space Jam, which is huge. And for a minute, his Twitter account, his Jumpman23, went from Jumpman23 to Monstars. Mike and Warner Brothers, they're making a lot of money together off of their relationship stemming from Air Jordan. He had a re-release of the Air Jordan sneaker and apparel in 2015 with his own website. So that's what came out of it, a real close relationship with Warner Brothers. And Nigel will second this. If Mike wanted to come and do any kind of movie with them, they'd say, here's a blank check.
Yeah.
He don't want to do it.
You made mention about the Monstars, Nate. The interesting thing, if that movie was done now, the process would be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
When we were interacting for those scenes with the Monstars and Mike, we would do the movements first, Adam, and then they would go in and digitize them and then animate them after the fact. Like Nate was saying, it was against a green screen. But for him to actually look like he's pushing against somebody and beating somebody, those moves were done. Now, the finish, obviously, it was different because the finish was usually something spectacular and a little movie magic at the end. But leading up to the payoff, all that dribbling and, like I said, bumping and pushing, giving some resistance to him, we all did that stuff. And those were those funny outfits that Nate said that we had on, and up to our eyes were the only things that you would see because they slapped the Monstars basic movements based off of what we did leading up to what was seen on the screen.
Absolutely fascinating. I just can't thank you both enough for elaborating on this. And I've seen a couple of good photos online. Nate, I think you may have posted them. They're somewhere online, which I'll include into the show notes of this episode. But it shows Jordan and numerous guys in the green suits that you're talking about. And I assume yourself, Nate, and Nigel are 2 of those guys, the green team.
I don't know if you were aware, Adam, that Warner Brothers came out with a book called Space Jamming, The Making of Space Jam.
I knew of the title, but I don't barely know anything about the actual release, if you don't mind elaborating.
In conjunction with the release of the movie in 1996, thereabouts, they came out with Space Jamming. Michael and Bogues hit the big screen. And this book basically tells you all about the making of the movie, from the animation to special effects. And they have, various different pictures, different sections. Like they have the section on the Jordan Dome, and they speak about the Jordan Dome and have pictures from Mike working out, playing in the Jordan Dome. They have a section about the green screen team, what we did, and basically elaborating on what Nigel had just said about they wanted everything to be authentic. So when you see Mike, lean in and bump somebody, that he's actually hitting someone and he's reacting to it naturally. So it's not being staged, which you can still go on Amazon and pick up a book for yourself if you so choose.
I'll definitely be heading towards Amazon to purchase that because that sounds fantastic. There must have been a few photos from that book that you may have uploaded, Nate, at some stage, because I did see some photos which seem very similar to what you're describing.
It's on my IMDb profile.
That's it. That's where I saw it. So I'll include a couple of photos in the show notes to this episode. Just another quick thing I'd love to ask, guys, before we sort of wrap it up, and I thank you so much for your time today. You talked about how you both worked together to put the teams on the floor at the Jordan Dome. Obviously, it started off with some of the top-level college guys from Nigel's alum, UCLA, and then you had some of those big-name NBA guys coming into play as well. What were those discussions that the 2 of you had where you were trying to put together teams? How did you go about trying to choose who played who?
To be honest, Tim Grover was really the person that had the final say on that. For instance, Michael Jordan took a liking to Chris Johnson, Marques Johnson's son. And Mike wanted Chris to be on his team, even after, because it got to a point where in the beginning the UCLA guys came, mostly college guys. When the pros started to come and start to come in mass, it got to a point where it was just all pros. But Mike instructed Tim Grover and myself and Nigel that he wanted Chris to be on his team no matter what. No matter what.
That's a huge compliment for Chris, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'll never forget the first day that Cedric came up to the Dome, because we had Nick Van Exel supposed to have been in the scene, and Nick didn't show up. And so Ken Ross instructed Nigel and I to offer Cedric a certain amount to be in this particular scene. It was a locker room scene. So we got in contact with Ced, and we gave him the amount. Of course, he said yes right away, no problem. So that's when he started coming up to the Dome. So when he came up there, he seen that Chris was on Mike's team, and he had to wait a game or so. And he says, like, what's going on? Why is he playing? And he said, because I heard it's supposed to be all pros, right? So I was about to explain it to him. Mike said to me, Nate, what did he say? I said, well, Cedric wanted to know why was Chris playing, and he's not a pro and all that. And then Mike said, because I want him to play. And so Cedric had some choice words. So Mike said, when you get on this court, I'm going to dunk on you. That's what he told him. I'm going to dunk on you. So he got on the court. They jabbing and trash talking each other. And Mike said, what did I tell you? He made a move on Cedric where he faked Cedric. Cedric went one way, Mike went the other way, and they met at the rim, and sure enough, he dunked on him. But on the very next play down the court, Cedric Sabala's team, somebody shot the ball and missed, and and Nigel can attest, Cedric, he's the garbage man. He cleaned it up and laid it up. He didn't back down, but Mike did dunk on him.
I also remember somebody said, look whose name is on the dome. And that's who determined who played. It wasn't Mike that said that. It was somebody else.
Right.
I'm really glad that you mentioned Cedric Sabalas as well. Cedric's a former guest of the show, and he talked very fondly about his involvement with the movie and how his kids think that that's probably better than anything he did during his NBA career was the movie itself because of Bogues.
We had everybody play up there. We had Shaq come through, Grant Hill. I mean, we just
Dennis Rodman.
Thank you, Nigel, that you mentioned that. That's how Dennis Rodman became a Bull.
We actually saw that deal go down.
That was Mike's first chance to see Dennis day in and day out, and he realized, even though Dennis was out there doing all that crazy stuff on camera, but when he wasn't on camera, that first of all, he was a real quiet guy, number one, and when he got on the court, he just played basketball like he's supposed to. And he was an exceptional basketball player who can rebound his behind off. And that right there sealed that deal with Dennis Rodman going to the Bulls. And I never forget, Magic came in and said, oh, Dennis is going to be on the Bulls? They win in the championship. Because you got a guy who can get 15, 18 rebounds and
defend.
And half of them going to be offensive rebound, who's going to beat them?
That's exactly right. It's such an interesting time in the NBA's history as well, because Rodman joined the Bulls, as you said. I think in early October of 95, he had the press conference to say he was joining the Bulls. So Magic would actually come back in late January or early February of 96, briefly.
Right.
It all sort of came together around Space Jam and the Jordan Dome. So it's incredible to think all these years on, it led to 3 straight titles for the Bulls. Of course, Rodman was a huge part in that. A fantastic and really fascinating period of time that the both of you were involved in.
Adam, no exaggeration, we saw that deal go down.
Do you mind elaborating a bit more on that one?
Only thing that I'll say is that it started at the Jordan Dome, yes, though the pickup ball and all that, but when they actually decided to make that deal happen, that took place at the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Yeah, we was there.
Wow.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
At the Villa, right?
At the Villa, right?
Because what happened was, Adam, Mike had to go away for about a week. Prior to that, he was living in Mulholland Drive in a house they was renting for him. So when he came back to finish the movie, they got him a villa at the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was just, oh my God, out of sight.
Adam, that's what I'm saying. They got all of us rooms there.
Oh, wow. They really looked after you guys.
It was incredible.
But let me say this, though. Me and Nigel had to kind of negotiate and kind of let them know our importance to the film. And once they realized that, it was smooth sailing, especially working with Gordon Webb, who was the unit production manager. He was great to work with.
How much did we learn from Gordon Webb?
Oh, wow, man.
Incredible, but the information that he shared with us was priceless.
He showed us the things he had to sign off on. I mean, from everything from the caterer to craft services, to people's deals. He was very sharing with us.
He said he wanted us to know. He said, you're in this position. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to do. This is what you can do. This is what will raise an eyebrow at some folks, but you might could get away with it. Very forthcoming and sharing of his knowledge.
Nigel, do you remember we were standing on Universal Studios lot because that's where Ivan Reitman had his production company, Northern Lights. He said to Nigel and I, Gordon Webb, he said, in Hollywood, one day you are a PA, the next day you run in the studio. Did he say that to us?
Yes, he did.
And that was inspiring because he looked at us, and I have to say this, Adam, Nigel and I are not white, we're black. But he still said that to us in 1996, saying that, hey, like Nigel was saying, y'all can go far. Just keep at it.
That's fantastic to hear. And obviously you've had a string of credits and involvement in numerous commercials, movies, whatnot, from even before this Space Jam, of course, but since then as well. So it's just unbelievable to hear this sort of stuff from the both of you. And I can't thank you enough for taking time to chat with me about it. I would just like to quickly ask, I read an LA Times article that was in, I think, late August of 96, and it said that Warner Brothers put up 250 promotional posters on LA bus shelters, and then when the article was printed, it said that 209 of those posters had already been stolen. Do you remember about the build-up to the movie's release itself, given that you were involved, of course, throughout the whole filming of it, but just before it premiered, what do you recall about the build-up to the actual Space Jam release?
Well, you know what? I don't really recall all those particulars that you just mentioned, and Nigel might have more of a recollection.
I remember one.
Go ahead, Nigel.
You probably will if I bring this up. Do you remember on Highland Boulevard, right before Santa Monica and Highland Cross?
Yes, yes.
This is no exaggeration. Probably was 50 or 60 feet high, probably about the same width. That's driving up Highland Boulevard. I don't know if you're familiar with LA or whatever, but it crosses all the big name streets that when you think of Hollywood, when you think of the industry, I can't even call it a billboard, but
it was on a building.
They took the whole building, and they had Michael Jordan
and Bugs Bunny. Space Jam. That's right. You're right, Nigel.
The posters being stolen and saved, I can understand that or whatever. But that right there told me that one, MJ is bigger than any star at that time, and two, he crosses over to all industries of entertainment and business.
And let me give you a personal story, Adam. I have twins that were born in 95, December 95, Milan and Devon, my first set of twins. They were born right after the making of Space Jam.
All right.
And so, of course, as they were growing up, they would always watch that movie. My son loves basketball, my son Devon. He loves, it's incredible how much he loves basketball. And he loves Space Jam, but he loves the song, I Believe I Can Fly. He loves that song with so much passion that every time he hears it, he sings as loud as he can sing. And then every time my children would watch Space Jam when they were small, they would always wait for the credits and then go to the TV and point to my name. Like, that's my daddy. So,
that's fantastic.
I just want to end this by saying that was a magical moment in time that Nigel and I had in sharing, along with Michael. Nothing can duplicate it, along with Joe Pickett, too, working with Joe Pickett. I don't want to not mention Joe Pickett because he's a mentor, and he's someone who supported Nigel and us throughout the years and taught us so much.
Incredible man.
Yeah, incredible beyond imagination.
But even a better person. He's loyal to a fault, and he has the biggest heart that I've ever seen in somebody that is that high up the food chain when it comes to creativity and advertising. I'm sorry to cut you off, Nate, but I just wanted to get that out. Joe couldn't have been done the way it was done without him, because I don't think Michael would have been that giving. Now, I'm not saying that from a professional standpoint, he wouldn't have done what he was paid to do, but whatever he had, he gave. Joe orchestrating everything, Michael's trust and that comfort level. Matter of fact, all the ball players.
Yes, all the ball, not just Charles Barkley.
Grandmama, Muggsy. When they saw Joe at the helm, man, shoot.
Yeah.
They all would have signed up for that and would sign up for it again.
And I want to thank you for saying all those things you said about Joe, because you are so right. And we cannot give Joe Pickett enough praise, because I would be nowhere in this business without Joe Pickett, without question. But we did have a funny moment. We at the Dome, and Jordan is playing, and Joe walks into the Dome and walks on the court and goes, you. And Mike said, Joe, what are you doing? He said, we're playing, man. Get off the court. We're not filming. You ain't directing this. So Joe looked at Mike like, what? Because Joe's so used to being in charge. But yeah, Joe Pickett made it all worthwhile. And like Nigel said, when all the other players came, Joe Pickett is the greatest commercial director in American history.
Bar none.
On the planet, okay? His awards are so through the roof, it's ridiculous. And he's worked with everybody and anybody, and he's an innovative creator.
Even more than that, Nate, all these young guys that you see out there now, if you ask them, who do they talk about? Michael Bay loves him.
David Fincher, all were his proteges.
They all stole from him, man. Yeah. They all took something from, like, Michael Bay's classic hero shot. That's a Joe Pickett shot.
Yeah. Tell you what, Adam, we learned so much from Joe Pickett, and we still stay in contact with him to this day. Now, Joe Pickett does not want to see another Space Jam movie made. He thinks it's a standalone movie, and he also says there were so many different factors that made it a magical moment in time. You can never get that many players. You can never have those circumstances repeat themselves. My only thing I would say to those who are at Warner Brothers, if they're going to try to make a Space Jam 2, it would have to be based on some kind of universal theme, like where it has a message about climate change or something, and you make that the central theme of the movie. Now, how you incorporate LeBron and Bugs Bunny and have a basketball game, I don't know how you do that.
That's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do either of you see that Space Jam 2 coming? I personally hope not. I guess in this day and age, you just never can be too sure. But it just sounds like it was a culmination of the best group of people at the right time, and everything just came to be what Space Jam is now known as, 2 decades later. So it's been fantastic to have a chance to speak with you both for this period of time. Thanks very much for letting it happen. I can't thank you enough for being a part of the episode today.
Adam, my last word on that. Nigel Miguel is a great person to work. I feel so fortunate to have done all the things he and I have been blessed to work on. He's such a joy to work with, such a top-notch professional, and such a great person. Our best moments have been where we're sitting on the set and said, we sit and look at each other and say, do you believe we get paid for this?
Appreciate that, Nate, and brother. I feel the same way, man. I thank you, too. You've opened up some doors for me, and I feel that, I've opened up some doors for you. But at the end of the day, the best stuff that we've done it together.
Yes, without question. And hopefully we'll have a few things that we'll still be working on in the future together, collaborating. And hopefully we can come back and talk about some future things we're doing or that we are doing.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. That's a nice tease there for possibly a future chat as well.
Adam, thank you, man, for, allowing us to share some of our moments. And it's a great show that you do. And I know I was a guest before, but anytime, man, anytime. And I'm sure Skate feels the same way, that you have a topic that, you feel that we could be a part of. I'm on board because I enjoy what you do and I enjoy how you do it.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'd like to second that, Adam. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts and experience on working on Space Jam. It seems like you got something really good going over there in Australia. And maybe one day we can come down there.
Yeah, definitely. You should come and visit Down Under here in Australia. It's a great place.
Live in studio.
Sounds good. If you ever do head this way, we'll lock it in for sure. Again, guys, thanks so much. You've been very accommodating with your time, and it's great to be able to connect with you, Nate, as well. And again, Nigel, thanks for coming back, and I look forward to chatting with you guys again sometime in the future.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you.
All righty.
Take care, Nigel.
All right, buddy. Yeah, man.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. Suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. You can leave me a voicemail. Just visit inallairness.com/voice. Click start recording, leave your message and press stop. You can even listen back before you submit. Press send and you're done. Now it's time to share another wonderful review from a fan of the show. Thanks to Paulosaurus, aka Paul Warren. I hope I pronounced that right, Paul. On the USA iTunes store. It's titled An Inimitable Podcast. Very clever. And it reads, one of the best NBA-centric pods there is, especially if MJ is a fixture on your NBA Mount Rushmore and you have an appetite for NBA history. The minutiae really takes you back and helps set the scene for classic league moments, such as Bird taking up a coach's offer to cancel practice if anyone could hit a half-court shot and swishing it. And, as noted by several previous reviewers, Adam's interviews are excellent at bringing out the unique charm of each of his guests. It was especially fun hearing Rolando Blackman describe the end of regulation in the 87 All-Star Game.
Confidence, baby! Confidence!
This is a pod for true fans, by true fans. Absolutely love it. Adam and friends, please keep up the outstanding work. Thank you very much, Paul. That's a very flattering review, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you were kind enough to leave one for me, so thank you very much. Worldwide, the show currently has 63 reviews, 60 of which are on iTunes and 3 on Stitcher. Thanks for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. As I love to say, your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways you can support the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are worth their weight in gold. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. iTunes, visit inallairness.com/iTunes. Add it to your Stitcher playlist, inallairness.com/Stitcher. You can also subscribe on Pocket Casts, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, other podcatchers, and, of course, via the Podcasts app on your iOS device of choice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.